Hi, grade 8. I'm going to go over some hand tools today. So I've attached this hand tool page to the Google Classroom, and I've emailed it to your parents. And you've probably seen something like this before, but this is the page that I want you to get out. It should have 24 hand tools on it. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you each one of them. And we're going to go over what they're called, and we'll go over a use or some uses for them. Okay? So you get out this sheet and you pause the video as you need to write down the name and the use. Now I'm going to challenge you to get the spelling right. I'm not going to give you the spelling. You'll have to maybe look it up online or figure it out with your parent. But I'm also going to attach a set of pages that has some hand tools and information about it, so you can probably use those pages to help you out. But this video is just a little bit more hands-on, so you can see the stuff that we actually have here in the classroom. So, number one, it's called the bar clamp. Okay? So this we would call a bar clamp or a pipe clamp. In this case, it's a pipe, so it's an actual hollow pipe, so this would be a pipe clamp. But sometimes they'll come in a steel bar, and so it would be called a bar clamp. And as you can see, it's really big, but it can be adjusted to different sizes. And then at this end, this is a screw point end where it would tighten on. And you would use this on longer material, wider material that you're trying to put together. So when we build bedside tables in grade 10 or different things like that that get wide, and some of the simpler clamps don't work, this guy's really good because he goes nice and wide, and he holds really tight because you can screw this end really tight. So again, you'd have to be careful when you're doing good woodworking that these two metal parts are not going to damage your good wood. You always want to have scrap pieces of wood in between here. So that's number one, a pipe clamp. Number two is this guy. This is a C-clamp. Okay? And so a C-clamp is used to hold two items together. It has a certain limitation on how wide it'll go. So every C-clamp will have a number down here that tells you how wide this is. So this is a 5-inch C-clamp. And again, it just has a screw point at the end of it here that you will thread in to close the gap here. Okay, close that gap and tighten around a different object. So that's a C-clamp. Next one we have is a tri-square. So this is a tri-square. It is used to make a 90-degree angle. So a perpendicular angle to a board. So most often you're going to have a board. So we'll pretend that this is a board, and I need to make a mark right here to cut at that point. So I'm going to place this on the board, and it's going to make that 90-degree line to the edge. So perpendicular line to the edge. Now some of these tri-squares will also be used as a ruler, so it'll actually have a measuring device on the bottom edge. But the key thing here is that it's always 90 degrees, and 90 degree is a really important number when we're building stuff, okay? So lots of construction means you need that 90-degree angle. So this is a good thing to have in your tool belt. Next one we got is a hammer, and I've got a couple of hammers here, okay? You'll notice that this back hook here, okay, is different on these two hammers. This one has a more of a claw. So this is called a claw hammer. And then this guy is called a rip hammer. Now obviously the size is different as well, but you can get both of these in bigger or smaller sizes. The idea is that this claw hammer is a little bit better for pulling nails. You get that more leverage, okay, more leverage when we're trying to pull a nail. Whereas this less of an angle is easier to get in between two boards and pry those boards apart, so you rip them apart. So a rip hammer and a claw hammer. Obviously the main use of a hammer is to put a nail into a board or into a surface, I guess, of some kind. This one, quite often they'll come labeled as how heavy they are, so a 20-ounce hammer. This is not labeled on the handle, but it's definitely a smaller, finer woodworking handle for building small stuff because it doesn't weigh very much. Okay, if this is 20 ounces, This is probably about 10 ounces. It's quite light. Okay, next one, combination square. So a combination square looks like this. It has the ability to, you can loosen this and move the ruler part, okay, depending on whether you need this 90-degree angle here or if you need this 45-degree angle here. And again, a combination square means it does a variety of things, a combination of things. And again, the number one thing is it can do the 90 and the 45-degree angle across a board. And so you would hold that against that surface and you can make an either a 45 or a 90-degree angle. You can measure, because this will be a ruler. It has both metric and imperial, so inches and millimeters or centimeters. And you'll notice it has this little bubble on it, okay? So it has a level, and if you needed to set it somewhere to level something out. Now most of these will also have a little pin in here that has a sharp point on it. It's called a scratch awl. I don't have the one in here. It must have been removed and not replaced. But so those are the combination of things that it can do. Now obviously it can only level in this direction because when you turn the bubble this way it just goes to the top. So you got to make sure it's held in this horizontal plane. Okay, so that's number 5, a combination square. Okay, the next one we have is just a simple handsaw. Okay, so these handsaws are not as common as they used to be. There are so many power tools, corded and cordless power tools that you can use for the same job. So these aren't as common, but we definitely have a few of these and we'll use them from time to time. Okay, you'll have different types. So sometimes you'll have a rip saw and sometimes you'll have a crosscut saw, and you'll know that by the teeth. And if the teeth alternate sides, that'll be a crosscut. And if the teeth are all in a straight line, now you're talking about a rip saw. So there's a handsaw. Okay, flip the page over, number 7. And number 7, we've got a variety of wrenches. So the one that's shown on your page will look like this. Okay, it'll have 2 ends that are open. And so we would call this an open end wrench. Sometimes you'll have only one end open and one end closed. We'd call this a combination wrench. And sometimes you'll have both ends closed. So that would be a closed end wrench. And they all will have their units, they're labeled on them. So this will be a 5/8 inch wrench, both sides. This guy here that's both open, he actually has a 12 millimeter and a 14 millimeter. And this guy that has 2 closed, he's a 3/8 and a 7/16. And so when you hear those words like 3/8 and 7/16, that would be that fraction of an inch. So 3/8 of an inch. And when you hear the millimeters, 12 or 14, that's obviously 12 millimeters wide. So this would be a metric wrench, and these would be imperial wrenches as well. Okay, next one. Needle nose pliers. So we've got these needle nose pliers that obviously have this kind of pointed alligator looking mouth on them. They've got some teeth in here. They've got an area in here that you can cut wire. So this little circle here, you open that up and you stick a wire in there and they'll cut a wire for you. These teeth are real good for gripping, so you grab onto some wire and pull it through an electrical box. And so this has a variety of uses, these needle nose pliers, but they're definitely a must for your toolkit if you're an electrician. Okay, next one we got are some side cutters. Okay, so we could call these wire cutters or side cutters, and again their only real use is to cut. However, they do have some teeth at the back side here, so if you do, get in a pinch where you need to get a wire, pull a wire through, you can grab on and pull with these in case you don't have your needle nose or something. But these will be a little bit better for cutting because the whole blade is there to cut wire, or maybe a little bit longer or wider. But you can also use them to grab and pull. So side cutters or wire cutters. Okay. So the most common accurate name for these guys are locking pliers. Now we're going to probably hear a lot of vice grips from time to time too. because they act just like a vise. And there's actually a company that makes them called vice grips. And so, but they're locking pliers of some kind. So the bottom side here, you can adjust the size of the mouth. So as you screw this end will get bigger or smaller, depending on what you're going to grab onto. And once you get it onto there, then you can lock it in place. And that thing will lock onto whatever you want it to. And you need to flip this bottom edge here. Okay, you can see that little lever there. It helps you flip, release, and lock. And so these are really good for grabbing onto maybe nuts or bolts that you're having trouble with, or maybe you don't have all the tools that you need. And this is one of those kind of multi-purpose tools. It's not perfect for that, but it can help, especially with these teeth and the ability to lock in place. Okay, next one, some slip joint pliers. So slip joint pliers, they've got this little joint in here that will move or slip. And obviously that makes them bigger or smaller. Okay, so you can see when it's at the smallest, this tip here doesn't touch when they're closed. And when it's at its biggest, it touches here, but it hasn't touched here yet, so the mouth is a little bit bigger. And you'll see that there's some teeth here that help you grab on and pull. Again, nuts and bolts if you need to grab on, or pull wires through. These things can be helpful, but there's probably other tools that are better suited for that. Kind of a multi-purpose type tool. Just like our next one here, we call these workman's pliers. Okay, so these workman's pliers, you'll see they resemble a lot of a needle nose without the pointy nose. Okay, they kind of got this blunt nose, but they do the same thing. They'll cut wires, they'll grip at the back, and they'll grip at the front with their teeth, and we call these workman's pliers. Okay, so that's first 12. Let's go to the next 12. So this is number 13 here. This is a level. This particular level will level horizontally, diagonally. So this guy will level something, or see if something is a 45-degree angle, and then vertically. So there's 3 bubbles on this guy. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And those 3 bubbles help you see if something's level. You can't level it for you, but it tells you if it is level or not. This particular one also comes with a ruler on the edge, inches and centimeters, or imperial and metric. And you can see that it goes to 48 inches, which means this is a 4-foot level. Okay? It's actually really good to use as a straight edge sometimes too, when you have to make that long straight line on the side of a building or a wall or something, a floor. And so these can be used obviously as a straight edge, but it's not their main purpose. Their main purpose is to see if something is level. Check for levelness. Okay, next one is a chisel. So that next picture, number 14, is a chisel. It has this sharp blade at the end, usually a wood, plastic, something softer on this end. So one thing to be careful when you're using a chisel, you're usually using it to hammer at the end and take an edge off a board. Groove out a board, okay, groove out a pattern, remove a little bit of wood. You never want to use a metal hammer on something like this, because over time you're going to damage the end of your chisel. And so quite often when you have chisels, you have rubber hammers. Okay? And rubber mallets is what you use to hit the end of that chisel so that you don't damage the end of it, you don't break that. Extend the life. Okay, now this next one is not very widely used. However, we do use this in grade 9. And it's called a jack plane. And a jack plane looks like this, and at the bottom here, it's got a little blade sticking out. Okay, and when you hold it at the side, it's a little hard to see, but it's just sticking out a little bit below the surface, so that when you run this along a surface of a board, it takes off that top layer. It shaves off a little bit of a layer. And so we use this when we build our fish bats in grade 9, and we use it to round off the edges of a board before we put it on the lathe. And so we call that a jack plane. Okay, got a nice handle here, knob here, and it gives you lots of good power to take a groove or a layer off the top of a board. Okay, Next one is called a sliding T-bevel. So this is a sliding T-bevel. It usually comes looking a little bit like this, but then this thing, it's got a little wing nut here. So you loosen the wing nut, and then you can adjust this guy. Adjust him whatever angle you want or need. And so this guy's job is to replicate an angle from somewhere else or replicate an odd angle. So when I say odd, I mean something other than the 45 or 90 degree angles that you can get from a lot of other tools. These are our most common angles that we use all the time. We probably use like a 22.5 once in a while when we're building rafters and stairs. But for those weird shapes, those irregular shapes that have angles that are different, and you need to replicate that somewhere. Or you set this using a protractor because you need to get a certain angle that's not 45 or 90, maybe 78 degrees for some reason. So you can set this guy to 78 degrees, lock him in place, and mark that on a board. Or for example, sometimes we'll use it on the table saw blade to tilt the blade so that we can cut a beveled edge at a certain degree, a certain angle. And so this would be handy for replicating an odd angle. Okay, that's called a sliding T-bevel. Now, I've got a few of these things here. Which one is this one? Okay, so this is a pry bar, number 17. This is a pry bar, and you'll see it's got this scoop at the back, it's got this hook at the front, it has a space for a nail to go in so that you can pull a nail out. It also has a space down here for a nail and down here for a nail. So this is something for pulling nails, separating boards, kind of a renovation type tool. So you're taking stuff apart. And that's kind of a destruction type tool that this would be used for. It'll come in different lengths. This one looks about 16 inches maybe. Okay, so that is a pry bar. And the next one is a very similar tool. You'll hear it referred to as a crowbar, but it's actually a wrecking bar. Okay, I've even heard it called a gooseneck before, and I think you can tell why it looks like a goose. But this is called a wrecking bar, and the one I'm holding is very small. It's only a 12 incher. But you'll get them up to 3 feet long probably, and again you'll notice that it has that spike at the end here to get a nail in, and here it has this flat part that you can stick between boards, pull them apart. Okay, so this is called a wrecking bar because it's used to wreck, pull apart, destruct when you're doing renos, or you're taking buildings apart, or you're taking fences apart, things like that. Okay, the last page. We've got a file here next. So there's different files we have in the shop. We have wood files and metal files, and we have curved files and flat files. We have cylinder files. But what I've got for you here is just, it's got a moon shape on top and a flat bottom. Rough edges here, rough edges there, and obviously a file is used to smooth the surface, take out some imperfections, and sometimes just make the look of something a little bit better. Okay, get rid of some humps or grooves or just things to make it look better. So a file is used to remove a little bit of the surface. The next one, I don't know if you can see it here. My papers are resting on it. I'm going to just tilt my camera a little bit here so that you can see it. But it's called an anvil. There we go. So this guy here is called an anvil, and that's the next one on our page. That's number 20. An anvil is used for metalwork, and in grade 8 we do a project where you make a necklace, a dog tag, and within that you need to do a little bit of metalwork. You do some shaping and some punching and drilling, and so this anvil has different shapes on the end here for curving stuff. So when you're doing metalwork like horseshoes, or maybe you're making a blade of some kind, you need it to curve. Okay, so that's why it's got this curved part, this flat part, Within the flat part, there's a couple of holes for when you're doing punching or drilling into something and you need to have a surface to go into. So that's what this guy is. He's a really heavy unit, so it doesn't vibrate a lot when you get onto it and work with it. Okay, so that was an anvil. The next one is called a punch. And this is a punch. It'll have a flatter end on it, a bit of a point, but still not really sharp, not like a nail set or something like that. This is just a metal punch that you, again, you would use with this anvil by placing a piece of metal, getting the punch in a spot where you want to make a drill hole, giving it a whack with a hammer, and that scores it. That makes a little score in the metal so that when your drill bit goes in, it catches that opening or that little point that you pushed in to your piece of metal. So that's what this punch is for. The next one I do not have an example of here at the shop right now. That next one are called odd leg calipers. Okay, so this one here is a point for scratching, and this one just has a little bit of a hook. And so the idea is it kind of looks like a compass, and you want to be able to open or close it to a certain distance. You measure that using a tape measure. So let's say that you want to mark something exactly 1.5 inches from the edge. You would set this open to 1.5 inches, and you would take this hooked part, okay, this kind of a curved hook on the bottom, and you'd run it along the edge of your metal where the spike part is 1.5 inches in, and it would be making a mark. You'd be scoring it as well, the same thing. You'd make that mark so you then know where you want to maybe cut or weld or drill some points, but it's for marking metal. Okay, 2 more. So this second last one here, number 23, is called a hacksaw. Okay, and you use a hacksaw for cutting metal. A very thin blade on him here with really teeny tiny little teeth. Okay, these little teeth aren't real sharp to the touch, I guess I'll say, but they're very tough. They're very strong, and they can withstand a lot of friction against metal. And so they will help you cut rebar and thinner pieces of metal, which you'll use when you cut for your dog tag. You'll cut it off a longer piece of metal, and you'll cut a little piece off with a hack saw. Okay, last one. So the last one is this screwdriver. And your picture, I believe, looks like this one. Okay, it's got a flat edge on it. We call this a slotted screwdriver. You'll see some screwdrivers that are square, and we call that a Robertson. And you'll see some that have an X pattern, and we call that a Phillips. And obviously, some guy named Robertson and some guy named Phillips invented those other two. As far as the slotted goes, I think that was just, I don't know where it got its name from, but it's a pretty simple screwdriver. But the use of it, very simply, is to put in and take out screws. Okay, sometimes you need to hold, sometimes a bolt will have a screw point end on it, so that you can hold it steady while you tighten or loosen a nut. So it can also be used for that. I'm sure some of you have used these to open up a paint can or two before, but its main use is to deal with screws. So, what your job is to make sure that you've got the names of all of these, you've got a use written down, and you kind of have a basic understanding of what these look like, what you could do with them, and how you're going to use them in this class. I hope that was helpful in getting through that hand tools page. And when you get back to school, we'll definitely show you these and let you handle them and see how they work. Okay, good luck.